I know it's been a fantastic one, so it would be amazing if you could just run us through your journey and, all the excitement along the way.
Sure, Prerna, it is my pleasure, and thank you for reaching out to me. I started off as a physical therapist when I came to first United States. But as I started doing individual patient care, by the way, I enjoyed patient care. It was at all not in my plan to kind of get into leadership roles or healthcare administration.
Right.
When I came to United States, I was barely 22, got my license at 24. Never realized that was a path because you have so little exposure when you're studying back home. So when I came here, that wasn't even my goal plan, but things kind of worked out that way. When I was a physical therapist, I enjoyed working with patients to decrease the pain. That was my big thing. But then as advanced clinically and both operationally, I started seeing a pattern. And I always said, as Indian Americans, just as Indian at that point, I think we have that innate ability to kind of recognize when things are not looking the way you would like to do. And you're a hard worker. And I think one thing that I tell about immigrants in the United States is we work extremely hard. So when I was doing this great clinical care in the hospital setting, which is George Washington University Hospital, one of the best in the country or world for that matter in Washington, D.C., I started seeing the systematic and structure and policy-driven issues. So when this opportunity for leadership came in, I just pounced on it because I knew that I could make a difference. And that's how my journey into administration began.
Oh, that's amazing, Dr. Srilekha. So if you don't mind, what all do you manage today? Like, what does your role include?
So I manage cardiac rehabilitation and pulmonary rehabilitation. And one of the reasons I emphasize that is that actually gives me immense joys because most of the cardiac and pulmonary rehab department is managed by nurses, exercise physiologists, dietitians, and respiratory therapists, right? And that's not at all my experience when I at least started my career. So I literally had to learn. I think one thing is learning. Second thing is gaining their confidence, right? I also manage physical medicine and rehabilitation, which is OT, PT, speech, and how the revenue cycle analysts work, how the front desk team works. And I do this for both acute care hospital and also outpatient.
When you think about physical therapist and somebody growing into leadership, etc., you would think about orthopedics and those specialties. So cardiac and pulmonary is really different. Also, when it comes to Indian context, I don't know if such specializations even exist. Most people think of physical therapy as something that you get after a musculoskeletal surgery. And cardiac and pulmonary rehab is obviously large, and I don't think it is as structurally managed, at least in India, as what you're doing right now in the US.
Prerna, I'm glad you said that because I think that is one of the things I pitched in back in 2016 or 15 when I had the fortune. I came to India for Global Economic Summit with Ivanka Trump delegation at that time. And I had a chance to speak to Apollo Hospital's Dr. Sangeeta Reddy. And I mentioned this to her. Acute rehabilitation and cardiac and pulmonary rehabilitation is something that is missing in India. I'm quoting from that conversation. But recently, one of my own classmates had a cardiac arrest. I came to, and then when I spoke to him and he had a stent put in, he had a bypass. And I asked him if he went through cardiac rehab, and there was really no concept of cardiac rehab at all, which
I haven't heard of it much, Dr. Srilekha. Like, if you choose to do it, if you really do that outreach, I don't think, unfortunately, that even for the large hospitals in India, I don't know if it's a standard part of the protocol because, unfortunately, I have also had friends who have gone through these incidents and I have not known of them to specifically get cardiac-oriented rehab or, some pulmonary issues, so they get very targeted rehab. I don't know. I think there's a lot of scope for work to be done. So physical therapy, again, to do with movement is more what people look at therapy as.
Yeah. Prerna, I think we are definitely doing this service to our patients. And one of the things, even educational folks, when they think of cardiac rehab, they think I can just walk, right? Cardiac rehab is much more than that. It talks about diet, it talks about exercises, it talks about intense progressive exercises. And the best part is we monitor using our telemetry systems to ensure that the heart is working at a pace that it should be working, and we progress the patients. So 99% of the patients that go through cardiac rehab will not have a second occurrence. Right, that is a research base. Whereas in India, if you see
the second occurrence is very common.
Very common. So that could be directly attributed to not having proper rehabilitation.
And I know we are diverting from our sort of planned context, Dr. Srilekha, but what's the typical duration of a patient going through cardiac rehab after, let's say, a stenting procedure? Just for an idea so that our audience also learns about it.
No, absolutely. It is anywhere typically between 9 weeks to 14 weeks.
Okay.
We call it as 24 sessions to 36 sessions. It all depends. If patient has a lot of cardiac comorbidities and associated comorbidities, then we take them through the sessions. But some of them, let's say a person comes into us who is a 17-year-old kid who collapsed in the sports because here there is a lot of emphasis on sports as well. So we have younger patients who are 17-year-olds, and then they go up until like 89, 99. We celebrated 100th birthday of a patient too, right? So if it is a 17-year-old, we take them up until 12 to 24 visits because we don't start them with basics. But on the same token, I think one of the things we try to tell is, I understand when you're starting off with treadmill, this may look like it's just a treadmill. I've done this. I've ran on it, but I said, trust us with the process, right? You got to progress.
You're going to start slow again.
Exactly. So it goes anywhere between 12 sessions to 36 sessions, but most often than not, the research shows that in order for the compliance and adherence of the home exercise program, because this is a lifelong disease management, it's not like you had stent put in and then you work out for 12 weeks and you're done, right?
Absolutely. Dr. Srilekha, you also mentioned when we first spoke, but I remember one of the secret sauces for you to understand how to think about how medicine is practiced in the US is being right by the patient, but also doing what is defensively right. So making sure that there are no open ends and making sure that there are no liabilities left for the practice either. Given that defensive approach to medicine, how has that sort of shaped your perspective on healthcare, the way we make decisions, and also the overall system's incentive for value versus outcomes? And are we really focusing on doing too much, or are we actually delivering value to the patient?
Prerna, you're asking some very good questions. There is definitely so much strong emphasis on defensive medicine, right? Because we document for liability protection and risk mitigation. So while patient safety is unquestionably essential, and trust me, all the clinicians here wholeheartedly put their heart and soul into patient care and the outcomes, but sometimes the framework that we have created here often appears more focused on compliance and blame avoidance than on optimizing patient-centered outcomes. I think as clinicians, if you're asking about bedside clinicians, the focus is on how do I optimize patient-centered outcomes. But sometimes we just ask them to document so much just to kind of do blame avoidance, right? That experience itself was very formative for me. I think that's how profoundly we incentivize clinical behavior, care delivery models, and organizational priorities too. So how do we develop models to ensure that patient is getting the outcomes they deserve, but also how do we ensure we are catering to regulations and compliance so our reimbursement is not decreased. And I think that is what, as rehabilitation leaders like me, it's important. That's one thing that I say. Exactly. We have to understand the broader healthcare ecosystems, right? Not just do physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech language pathology. We need to understand CMS policies, payment methodologies, fiscal intermediaries, regulatory compliance, accountability framework. So we can actually go back to our teams and say, this is why we do. So let's not get burnt out because it's easy if clinicians don't understand all of this, they just get burnt out because there is no system level literacy, rehabilitation risk. So they feel marginalized in decision-making process, right? And finally, I want to say the true value-based care requires rehabilitation professionals like us to actively shape policies. Otherwise, we fell, and then it's very easy for them to just get burnt out and give up on the profession.
I would say, impact that you are creating while still making sure that that balance of compliance and regulation is still made aware to them. So I totally get that. So you also mentioned, Dr. Srilekha, that rehabilitation increasingly, it plays a much larger role than just post-acute care, right? It is actually essential to a space that we as Circle Health also operate in, which is value-based care. Within the entire value-based care model, managing the patient post any acute incident is probably becoming like the most important part of managing a patient end-to-end. Whether it is length of stay, to readmission rates, to how overall they get outcomes over 3, 6, 12 months. rehab plays like a very, very important role. So within your ecosystem, how do you see the importance of rehabilitation changing?
Another great question, Prerna. Coming from a banking industry, I'm surprised how well knowledge you are with what's going on in healthcare system. That just because for us it's our bread and butter. Now coming to, I think, rehabilitation medicine,
Yes.
I think it is a strategically lever in value-based care, right? I mean, key metrics like length of stay, discharge readiness, readmission rates, fall prevention, functional improvements, discharge
Everything.
destination. I can go on and on. How much rehabilitation folks are involved? OTPT speech, without them doing what they're supposed to do with our stroke patients, joint patients, spine patients, elective patients, total hip fractures. I mean, the payer contracts and quality ratings and financial performance drastically goes down.
Everything.
And that's precisely why we need to kind of be focused on rehabilitation. So they get some therapy before they get into surgery. We do early and progressive mobility. Get them up 4 hours as soon as the surgery is done.
Okay.
Some of my therapists stay up until 9 p.m. because if the surgeon is done by 4 o'clock, we
You
let
need to
the
get them
patients
5 hours later.
Yep, we get them up and walking right then and there, right? And I think this evolution requires our rehab teams. I always go back to our own rehab teams. For us also, we have to demonstrate measurable system level impact, right? Not just
Yeah.
productivity or visit counts. Gone are those days where we say we hit our 24 units, we are done for the day. We should be able to demonstrate saying that how is that our early progressive mobilization indeed helped patients in the long term, right? And we also should be able to articulate how our services influence throughput, how we can avoid borders in ED, how do we avoid post-op complications, how do we reduce downstream utilization in the sense if patient gets readmitted, how much more therapy has to be done.
Correct.
And also, last but not the least, what system executives like to see is how do we influence total cost of care.
Most important, right?
That's exactly. So that's why I said the role of rehabilitation has totally shifted from just on an operational thing to do, like how respiratory goes in, nutrition goes in, therapy goes in, but it has moved into just strategic partnerships
True.
in this value-based care. And that's a good thing for the patient, right?
Very much.
Patient loves to get up and walk and go home, not going to nursing home and get stuck there for 30 days.
Right.
So this is all a good thing for patient care.
Dr. Srilekha, on that note, I mean, I've been speaking to some other leaders who keep mentioning about how more bundled payments are coming in. So, now today, even if a patient does get discharged and goes to a skilled nursing, you are still accountable for their care and hopefully ensuring that they don't get readmitted over the next 30 days, in some cases 90 days as well. Do you also manage influence in terms of how rehabilitation should work in the post-acute nursing facilities as well?
Oh, absolutely, right? That is where our partnership with care management teams come into picture. In fact, every
Great.
quarter we meet with, on a daily basis, we are talking to acute rehabilitation liaisons, right? Acute
Okay.
rehabilitation is this 3 hours therapy when we're trying to send our patients, because after that, we want our patients to go home and not get readmitted.
Right.
So we want to send appropriate patients to acute rehabilitation. Same thing, we're talking to our SNF administrators, which is skilled nursing administrators, and also care management to see this is the heart failure bundle we are following up with our patients. Do you have capabilities in your facility to provide this intense? Exactly. And in
Okay.
fact, if they don't, then that is a nursing home that's not on our priority list, right? Because the
Okay.
last thing we want to see is we provide excellent prehab before they get into surgery. They
Correct.
come onto surgery. We have these nice navigators who call the patient beforehand and try to figure out, do you have stairs? If so, do you have somebody that would take you into the stairs? If not, we'll send you to the nursing home. We do all of this groundwork to ensure the patient is discharged to the right destination, and we put them in nursing home and only
And then
to
they
realize
can't take care.
they can't take care, right? So the models are extended. I think that is the beauty of electronic medical systems, because we can actually see what's happening on the other end too. And if they don't follow through, we can choose not to send our patients there because, again, bundle payment, it penalizes us when patient comes back. So financial incentives, in a way, what Medicare puts through, even though it sounds too burdensome, there's a rhyme
Is
or
actually
reason
for the right reason behind it, right?
Exactly.
Oh, that's true. Right.